Our next guest is our good friend, Dr. AWR Hawkins, the Second Amendment writer for Breitbart News. What's going on, man?
Hey, what's happening? Good to be with you.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure having you on. So, you recently wrote a piece sort of pulling back the curtains on Mom Demand Action. Tell us what you learned about that.
Dude, you're getting me right off the bat.
Yeah, come on, man. We just dive right in.
It's kind of what you would expect.
Yeah.
They're a group that they don't really have any success they can point to. You and I have discussed. They're only still in the game because they have unlimited funds. The gun control lobby, via Bloomberg, dumps so much money into them that they don't have to win. They're not like you. They don't have to draw viewers. They're not like me. They don't have to draw readers. They just stay in the game. So you've always wondered, what would be one of the reasons that they're failing? Of course, apart from the fact the NRA's beating them, that we're beating them at Breitbart, that other gun groups are beating them, apart from that, why are they losing? It seems that people in the group think they're losing because they say Shannon Watts is a quote-unquote tyrant, that she is a quote-unquote nightmare. And, you can see that if you see this woman, she campaigns against guns for you and me, but she has armed security.
Yep.
That's almost all you need to know to assume. Yeah, she's probably like Dianne Feinstein behind closed curtains. She's that kind of tyrant, that kind of nightmare.
Shannon, I've been getting I'm getting a lot of echo. I don't know if you try turning down your volume just a tad because I can hear myself.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah. Sorry. All right, you good? Can you hear me now? You can still hear me?
I can still hear you.
Okay, perfect. So no, what I was saying, with Shannon Watts initially, like I came at her pretty even kill. I didn't really kind of go at her very aggressively, and I tried to come at her as fairly as possible. And then more and more, and as more as I start to interact and engage with her, she's not a very great person. And I mean, even outside the realm and the spectrum of the gun world, you start to pick up on certain aspects of a personality trait that is just not really good. And so it got to a point where I said, you know what, I'm at this point, she's just going to be nothing more than a transient punching bag on Twitter for me, because even when you try to engage her on a real level, she doesn't necessarily respond in the same way. She almost inevitably usually responds like a child. And for me, especially somebody in her position with the responsibility that she has as a leader of a so-called movement or group that's in place to advocate for what they say is gun safety, she acts incredibly childish with respect to the issue. So it strikes me as no surprise whatsoever that she has the reputation that you pretty much uncovered recently in your article. It doesn't surprise me at all.
If you think, though, before she came into guns, most people don't know this. I know you know it, but most people don't know. They think that she saw Sandy Hook happen and she's just this mom at home, and she put down the eggs in the egg beater and she took the apron off and said, guess what? I'm going to start a gun control group. That's not her. She's a PR executive. She was in a firm. She did a lot of things, and PR is her game. And she's been, yes, she's been pushing Mom's demand, but she's really been selling herself.
Yep.
That's what her colleagues are saying. Setting herself up for something. And there are lots of speculation. She lives in Colorado now. What's she up to? Why would she be out there? Those kinds of things. I'm not gonna carry out the speculation here, but I'll just say I'm like you. I'm not a bit surprised. And I think that's one of the reasons that her gun control arguments have been so what would be the right word? Anemic. Yeah. Because she's not really interested in the topic.
I'd say impotent, but
self-promote.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, she's a narcissist of the highest order. Absolutely.
Right.
I kind of picked up on that from the word go. And in living in this space the same way you have, you can usually pick up on that level of narcissism pretty quickly. And I don't really get that there's just a fundamental fire. There's like this fire burning inside of her that wants to push this gun control agenda above and beyond what it does for her from an advantage, what it does for her on a personal level, and the rising of her brand, so to speak, her personal brand, not necessarily the organization. You also wrote about gun violence in Mexico. So what did you learn there?
This is a sad story to me. I mean, it's sad for the Mexican people. The study came out and they looked at armed conflict. This is really hard to believe, but this is a scholarly study. It's not something that mom and pop did in the basement. And I'm not against mom and pop, but it's scholarly.
Yeah.
And out of all the countries in the world, Mexico is second only to Syria when it comes to armed conflict. That's so hard to believe when you think about the fact Syria's in a civil war. They were in a civil war throughout Barack Obama's presidency.
Yeah.
They're in a civil war now. If you're second only to them when it comes to armed conflict, I mean, somebody wake up. The gun control isn't working.
That is a huge deal. A huge deal.
Right.
It's honestly, I mean, it's frustrating because you point out the fact that gun control isn't working, and someone goes, well, someone watching this is like, why are you even bringing up gun control? Well, you and I are both aware of the gun control laws in Mexico, and they're incredibly strict.
Right.
And yet you still have this insatiable level of violence going on in Chicago too, in Mexico. And it's kind of like, even if it's not to say, hey, change the gun laws in Mexico, anybody here in America should be able to look at that example and understand that chasing the tail of more gun control is not the answer to solving any of the possible solutions. It's not the answer to solving any of the problems that we're having in this country with respect to violence, especially when that violence is very particularized in very, very hyper-focused areas. So it's like, it kind of annoys me that we constantly have to have this conversation about it over and over again. When I've pointed out to you, I've shown you the picture. This is exactly what the picture looks like. The picture doesn't look good. What we did to fix it isn't working, but yet you still want to keep doing what's not working.
Right. The other reason you bring up gun control, just so viewers understand, there are people running in Mexico this year. I've covered them. They're trying to get into office, running on doing away with the gun control apparatus so the law-abiding citizens can defend themselves. This is an argument being made in Mexico. It's not an argument you and I are birthing, and the Mexican power structure won't allow it to happen. And what it means is, just like in Chicago's South Side, it means that innocent Mexican citizens, they're slaughtered in the streets at such a rate that country is number 2 in the world for armed conflict, according to this study. That you can't escape the horror of that.
Yeah.
And gun control, in my opinion, is to blame.
No, absolutely. I mean, think about it. And we say this all the time, and I have to keep saying it over and over again, and I'll keep saying it over and over again because apparently people don't want to listen. When you take the guns away from the citizens, the only people who have them at that point are the people you really don't want to have them, which are the criminals. Mexico has very strict gun laws. Look who has all the guns in Mexico. These aren't the citizens who are running around having these gunfights in the middle of the streets in Mexico. It's not.
Right.
So who are these people? Pretty much the people who aren't supposed to have them. If that's not indicative of the failure of gun control with respect to dealing with violence, I don't know what else. I can't give a better example. There isn't one.
Right. No, you're exactly right. And for the people out there who think gun control is the answer, who still think that, understand that Mexico has background checks that require not only a criminal background check, not only a mental background check, but also a physical background check, checks your physical health, and a background check that covers whether you've ever had a drug addiction problem yourself or in your family. I mean, we're talking about such in-depth gun control, it's crazy. You have to register your weapons. You have to turn over all kinds of documentation. I mean, it's nuts. And after all that, what do we have? We have Mexico as the second most violent country in the world, according to this study, if you rate things on armed conflict.
Yeah.
Folks, Mexico, France, you look at where the most stringent gun control is, Chicago, and what do you see? I don't see tranquility. I see bloodshed. I think we got to learn a lesson.
Yeah, I mean, you essentially you're creating, I wish they would understand that you are essentially creating a bucket or a population of victims when you take away their right to bear arms, or heavily restricted so much that they're not readily accessible. And I don't know why we kind of have this childish like mentality and thinking that we can regulate violence away. Like it just doesn't work like that. And at some point you're gonna have to step outside of the virtual space of your safety zone and come into reality and understand that we have to deal with the issue head on. In reality. Right. And sometimes that means that you have to confront that issue, especially when it's confronting you. And I think for a lot of people, it's a lot easier to say, well, let's create more laws to make it stop. And then in their minds, since they live so far removed from that violence to begin with, because we're not talking about a violence that's pervasive throughout the country. And I'm talking about America here. We're not talking about a violence that's spread across the nation in every city. You just have everyone running around shooting and killing each other. We've already demonstrated on countless occasions that the vast majority of the crimes that are happening, the vast majority of the gun violence in this country are coming from very specific areas. Like there are small areas responsible for an incredible percentage of the gun violence in this country. And so being that far removed and saying from a distance, hey, you know what, make more laws so we can stop the violence over there. You don't see the results anyway. And so from that standpoint, in your mind, you think you've actually done something. When in reality, it was nothing more than self-servingness. And then the people who are in these areas suffer from it the most. Like the fact that in Chicago, at one point, like they just recently got the ability to have firearms in their own homes. It's not like we're talking about concealed carry here. We're talking about the ability to keep a gun in your home, which the vast majority of America typically doesn't have a problem with that. But like they literally just got the ability to do that. And so it's like, don't talk to me and look me in my eye and tell me, oh, they just want reasonable gun measures. They don't just want reasonable gun measures. It's clear as day. If you allow them and they had the ability to, they take them outright away from you. So, sorry, I just jumped on the soapbox.
That's all right. But there's no doubt you're right. But, here's the thing. The truth is cold and the truth is hard. And so when I say this, it's going to sound like I'm exaggerating. I'm not. The thing is, you say, I don't know why they keep pushing these gun control laws when this is the result. The reason is the senators who push this never have to face the life that they force those in the South Side to live. Shannon Watts never have to face that life either. She's going to have armed security the rest of her life because of Bloomberg. And to me, I can never get away from the racial component, buddy. I can never get away from that either, because most of the time the folks they're sacrificing are minorities in the inner city who are dirt poor. And these people are treated like animals. Now, they vote for these Democrats, don't get me wrong, they vote for them, but they're kind of tricked.
The reason that, by and large, the reason why I think that is, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's all right.
Yeah, and I say it all the time. If you can seep the idea and the notion of racism into a conversation, it's incredibly divisive. When you take into account the history of black people in this country, and then you poke at that wound constantly, and you use it to your advantage, it's easy to blind me with the idea of racism, and then for me to overlook what's probably in my best interest, because you're confusing me and distracting me with this idea of racism. So what's happened is they've injected racism into the political sphere of things. So majority of the people, like, I'm not going to vote for someone who I perceive to be a racist. Whether it's been confirmed or not, they've done a good job because they own the media platforms to present and color it that way. So from that perspective, I'm not even focused on the gun issue at this point. I'm not even thinking about it from that standpoint, because I'm like I'm not going to vote for someone who I think is a racist. And when you're able to align the idea of, say, for instance, the Republican Party with the idea of anybody and everybody who's in the Republican Party is considered a racist, it's easy to see why Democrats continue to keep having a stronghold over these communities. Unfortunately so, it's at the expense of their ability to defend themselves with a firearm. And then it largely ends up happening that the Enlightenment point tends to happen a little bit too late. And so then
it's at the expense of their life.
Yeah.
You're saying it's largely at the expense of them being able to defend themselves. What I'm seeing in Chicago and other places, it's at the expense of their life. In Chicago, there were 26 people shot over the weekend. 15 shot, 6 killed over the weekend. Last weekend was 26 wounded and 6 killed. So, I mean, this is what they're getting. You vote this way, and they promise you the world, but what do they give you? They give you death and blood in the streets. Folks, this is the outworking of gun control. And at some point, we have to go, you know what? I trust free people to be free people. I don't care what color their skin color is. I don't care what their origin is, socioeconomic standing. I don't care. They're free men. They're free women. Let them live like it. Freedom is theirs as well. And we have to get that message across.
Absolutely. And we'll continue to do so. With that being said, we're going to take a real quick break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about some more.